As always, during our live sessions, feel free to throw your questions in the chat. I'll get to them as I see them. We're going to open today. Someone who watched the video post after the live session finished had a question. It was about kind of the recommended amounts, primarily pertaining to water, fiber, and protein were the main three that they were asking about. So we'll kind of start with water, kind of one of the easier ones to calculate out. So whatever your weight amount is, so for example, let's say 200 pounds, dividing that by 2, that number, which in this case would be 100, would be the amount of ounces recommended to get in per day. So obviously that's going to vary based upon your weight. Other things that can impact that, time outside will increase that. Usually about every 30 to 60 minutes, you're usually going to need about another half to full liter of water on top of your recommendation. Now, if you add to that where it's strenuous activity independently, every 30, 60 minutes is another, again, half to full liter of water for your daily needs. So if you're doing strenuous activity outside, you're actually doubling that because it's 2 modifiers that are impacting that need for your body's replenishment. Trying to think other factors, understanding obviously your body needs water to function, but a lot of people don't realize that water is heavily used in the metabolic fat burning process. So if you're chronically dehydrated, you can potentially slow and inhibit the effectiveness of that process a little bit. And not staying hydrated can often sprout aspects of hunger. Not because your stomach's empty, like a lot of the little tips and trick things will tell you, but your body's trying to find moisture somewhere, somehow. So if you're keeping your body chronically underhydrated, it's going to make you feel hungry and crave for foods that it knows it will get moisture from. Biggest example would be carbohydrates. Carbohydrate is a sugar molecule bonded to a water molecule. So your body knows, hey, we can't find freestanding water because that's got to be the reason why they're not drinking enough. So let's make them find some food. So it drives a lot of those sweet cravings, carbohydrate cravings, because it knows, okay, if I can at least get this body to consume some carbohydrates, I can then, break the sugar off. They'll use that for fuel, but now I've got water to function for some of my other needs and allowances for. So, be mindful that you are getting enough in per day for that reason if you're trying to lose weight and burn body fat. Building muscle, kind of the same thing. Muscle tissues are about 70% water. So one of the things that I run into with guys who are really trying to crank up muscle mass, if they're underhydrated, that's going to inhibit how much their body can grow and develop those muscle cells, because if it needs the fluid there to build the cells as well. Those are the 2 biggest aspects as far as what we see a lot of for in here. And then we already talked about outside and then activity of that nature. Be mindful, certain medications require more water intake. And then another thing that a lot of people don't realize or know about, in order to get a lot of the junk that's in our water here in Arizona, most people are using some sort of filter, whether they're getting just bottled water from the store, or if you're using some sort of filtration unit at home, or a pitcher filter. Even though, yes, that's getting rid of a lot of the contaminants and things that are making the water unpleasant, it's also getting rid of all the mineral content that we would typically get if we were out in the wild drinking, spring water and such of that nature. So sometimes you need to put in the minerals another way. Usually Celtic sea salt, um, pink Himalayan salt are typical go-tos. There's some other higher end stuff, but they can be a little expensive, so I usually don't put those on the recommendations. Um, but there are some ones that are kind of up past even Celtic sea salt quality for that. And all you're doing is you're adding back in a bigger spectrum of mineral content to help your body function more effectively and to absorb and utilize the water more effectively. Because if you're pulling in just filtered water, because your body is used to the water having solutes in there of the minerals, it's going to throw off the osmotic balance in your cells. And that's the reason why a lot of times people, clients will say, like, I'm drinking all the water, but I've got to pee all the time. Well, that's because the water has been so purified that you can't find that balance, so it ends up flushing more than what it would necessarily need to. If you add in some of the minerals from those salts, again, Celtic sea salt, Himalayan pink salt, not just table salt. You don't want to do just that. Um, it will help your body's absorption and utilization of the water that you are drinking. So if you are someone that often comes in on the short end of how much water you should be getting, that's a way to kind of help bump that up and make it more effective for you if you can't get up to the recommended levels. Protein, the way we look at that is it's assuming that you're trying to exercise and or lose weight or even build muscle potentially. Minimum thresholds we look at is 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So I'll write that in the comments here. So 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. Okay, so if we go back to our 200-pound example, just for simple math, if you guys don't know, if we have 200 pounds, if we can divide that by 2.2, will give us our amount of body weight in kilograms. So let me grab my pull up here. So let's just round and say that's going to be about 100 grams. Sorry, it's going to be 100. It's a zero, not a oh. Okay, that's going to give us our 100 kilograms. Okay, if I could spell. Say approximately, just so no one yells at my math. Approximately. Okay, so that's how much our kilogram body weight is. So if we're doing 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram body weight, that would mean we were looking about 120 grams of protein per day. And then, like I said, that's kind of the minimum threshold if you are trying to put on a lot of muscle, rather than, our average client who's primarily here to lose weight. We're only looking for maybe a 5 to 10 pounds of muscle development, just to make sure that the body's in the right proportions, aesthetics, and things of that nature. Now, if you're looking at really putting on muscle mass, the need goes higher, or if you're trying to do kind of high performance type sports outlets, if you're doing more than just casual running or biking, you're going for really long distances that are frequent, at a high frequency throughout the week, we bump that up to about 1.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. And then next one that was asked was fiber. So for fiber, The recommended daily allowance is about 25 grams per day for females, and roughly around 35 grams per day for men. Um, those are, again, the general RDAs. Keep in mind that most RDAs are set because that's the minimum effective amount needed to ward off illness and or maladies. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be for optimum performance and health. It just means that this is what's going to keep most issues from occurring. Biggest example of that is, the vitamin C threshold is set. That's the amount you need to prevent scurvy. Which, for people who aren't familiar with that, is the weakening of the bones, which makes them very bendy and loose, which is not what we need for a strong skeletal structure. So that being said, that's the minimum. The RDA for vitamin C is very low, and that's the reason why you see with a lot of supplementation where there's like 1,000% of the RDA for vitamin C. That's because more and more research is coming out showing that these higher doses have greater impacts on well-being in other areas. That they're not necessarily impacting general functionality, but we're also not being, the best that we could be with that lower RDA level. So fiber can often be a similar thing. A lot of research and stuff that I see recommends higher. But that being said, there are different societies that are more hunter-gatherer that are very high in just protein in animal product and very low in their vegetable consumption. So there's very little fiber. And then there's the reverse, where there's very little animal consumption and a whole lot of vegetation and fiber intake as well. So take that for what it is. My biggest things with fiber, obviously it's going to help in aspects for blood pressure, cholesterol. It has some good positive impact, and then just aids in digestion. One of the benefits of soluble fiber beyond the cholesterol aspect is that your soluble fiber helps in not just regularity, but in the detoxification, because your liver will dump any toxins and stuff that it's purified out of your bloodstream, put it into the colon. The soluble fiber we want there to grab onto the toxins and then take them the rest of the way out. If you're not able to go regularly due to poor fiber intake, those toxins end up hanging out too long and can potentially cause damage into your large intestines and colon. So bear that in mind. Now, that being said, if your current fiber intake is very, very low, I recommend a gradual increase because trying to go from 10 or less grams per day to that 35 mark can have a lot of digestive upset and issues. So you want to kind of slowly bring that up over time to have a more pleasant outcome there. One of the reasons why we look at fiber for weight management is because it's one of the big factors that helps in what we call satiety, or that feeling of staying full longer from a meal. So the three things that help impact that are your protein, your fat content, and fiber of any one meal. Those are the three things that will make a meal take a little bit longer to digest over time. And what the reason why that's important is because it helps maintain and manage blood sugar. If you don't have a lot of protein, fat, or fiber, it usually means there's a lot of just carbohydrate, and just carbohydrates can cause a blood sugar spike, which then dysregulates our whole satiety factor because your body responds with more insulin, bringing your blood sugar back down, but then it starts to get down below ideals too soon, causing you to be hungry again. It's a very simplistic explanation. If you'd like more, let me know. We can talk about that another time. But essentially, what you need to understand is protein, fat, and fiber are the three things that help make a meal satisfy you for a longer period of time. So it's going to put off that hunger for a longer period of time, helping you manage not needing that, snack in the middle, in between meals, or not being completely famished by the time you get home, because your lunch didn't last you long enough, and because you're famished, then leading to poor nutrition choices at dinner after work. So the fiber is our big go-to, because fiber in its own right doesn't have a lot of calories attached to it, depending on where you're getting it from. Obviously, fiber with your starches and legumes, there's going to be some calorie with it. From a weight management standpoint, that's one of the reasons why we kind of look at vegetable intake quite a bit, because with most vegetables, you're going to get a high volume of fiber and high volume of food for very little calories. And that is very monumental in being able to still feel satisfied with the meal, because most of us typically get used to a certain volume of food, but we've been filling up on the wrong things. So when we're trying to bring the portions down on those areas, all of a sudden there's this big gaping hole on the plate, and that causes a lack of fullness psychologically in there, because we've got a set point of how much volume we perceive a meal needs to be satisfying. So your vegetables can come in, provide a very low calorie, high fiber filler source for you for that meal. So you can get the volume, you can still have some of the foods that you want, fill the rest of the volume with the vegetables to get that fiber in there, and then that will help you feel fuller a longer duration of time than if you had just simply cut the portions on the main things that have more calories added to them. We do this a lot. It does help. Again, volume and then the fiber helping keep the meal lasting longer before the next hunger zone sets in. We usually recommend at least one serving of vegetable with your major meals to aid with that. And then if you find that it's still not quite enough, then that's when we might look at a second serving of vegetables. Typical serving of vegetables is going to be about 1 cup of just about any kind, whether it be leafy greens, chopped vegetables, whatever. Again, just like I said, with just fiber in general, if you're trying to increase that, you may want to work on gradually increasing your vegetable intake, because if your body's not used to that amount of fiber, it can potentially be pretty rough for your digestion. If you do notice some issues with that, I would recommend doing some sort of probiotics with your daily intake, ideally from a food source, so like your yogurts, kefir, some sauerkrauts have live cultures as well. Things of that nature. If those aren't working, then you can look at a probiotic instead, or in addition to kind of help aid in that digestion. And sometimes you just got to play around with it. Don't give up on adding the vegetables just because you had a bad experience with one type. It may be that just either how fresh it was versus cooked can make a difference, because if fresh kind of doesn't sit well with you, doing steamed, grilled, saute, whatever, to help break it down a little bit more so it's more along the way before you put it into your digestive system. Fresh versus canned can make a difference on how easy or hard it is to digest some of those vegetables. And I don't get overly concerned with that when we're looking at the vegetables as a source of low calorie filler versus a nutrient source, if that makes sense. Obviously, if we're concerned about nutrient sources, we want to go more towards the fresh aspect of it. But sometimes we're just looking for a way to make the meal sit better and last longer for that satiety index for us. So I know, pretty long topic today. Hopefully all that helped. If you guys do have other questions with it, as always, throw them in the comments and I'll try and cover them on our live session next week. Again, we do every Tuesday at 5. If you're watching this as a recording from a later post, feel free, throw your questions in then. I'll pick them up on the next week. Until then, just remember to be persistent in your pursuit of better health. Have a great week.